Hello, hello. Dum 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 dum. This is the intro sound for the podcast. Alright, so this is the DINKY TehC podcast. I've had some recent issues in terms of audio stuff and video and things, little technical difficulties and such, so I will try to be as fast as possible. I just did a version before this, but I took out my earphones, so it actually stopped the recording right away. After like an hour, I noticed that. Anyways, that's hopefully to start on a funny note. Not really that fun, but I guess it's silly. Anyways, I guess I'll circle back to the brand. This is DINKY TehC. The purpose of our brand is to essentially make the idea of entrepreneurship simplified, and it's actually targeting kids is our primary focus to begin with, at least as a business, in pre-selling businesses by breaking them down into three parts of the market: the experience and the product, and essentially they all flow together through the ability to just sort of dissect any given idea into those three segments. And so therefore in the future I will be trying to do episodes in 3 minutes for that reason, and the same with music, perhaps in the future as well, by segmenting out the parts of the child books essentially, or any given idea can be sort of broken down or unpacked by using those templates which have the three parts to it, to sort of not only make an idea into a tangible product, but also a story. And every business is essentially a story, so this is how that is in essence aligns. I just shall revisit the top of the last episode, or the last recording that I just did, which was actually rehashing 3 previous recordings which I did, which were the first 3 episodes of podcasts, which were also videos. So as opposed to ripping the audio from those, I was just going to speak about those 3 and condense them into the first introduction version of the DINKY TehC podcast, which hopefully will increase in dynamism and fun, elements and positivity as time and things move along. But this is just the beginning. We're just trying to kick things off, so just trying to get things started, and also hopefully have some momentum to speak quickly to get through this as soon as possible, just to have something on the board for future momentum and things, and ideally an interest and some things for people to follow, and just more ideally actually like people coming into the brand in essence from the podcast would be optimal in terms of like music collaborations and or business or product collaborations overall. Like we're definitely trying to move towards learning more about like CAD development and in terms of 3D printing products and things, just experimentation, prototyping like different products in the short and long term, having a marketing backbone of a brand as well, also having a mergers and acquisitions mentality of a brand as well. So it's all really dynamic for sure, and it's very interesting. This whole brand is like literally a social experiment, I feel, and that's how it's designed. That's what the DNA is of this whole brand ultimately as well. It's DINKY TehC. It's made to develop a playing mindset, so people just want to play. They want to play the game of entrepreneurship consistently, and the whole community that revolves around this brand is ideally one that speaks to that mentality and interest of games, and games which cause change, and so therefore they're games for change, and as a result there is consistent opportunity throughout the world to want to play with each other, and especially people to come to play with me and things in the way of business, because like that's sort of the nature of the whole game, is like collaboration. In the meantime, DINKY TehC, Dinky is named after a dog, and he was also a lab, so it kind of was fun. It's collaboration, but that was not built into the plan or process. That was just happened to be the breed of the dog. Regardless though, something that I learned from one of the first podcasts is that attempt at a podcast is having influences sort of spoken about throughout the process of making the podcast, so that like ultimately, whether it's music or podcast, that it's possible to sort of give people some recognition and reference throughout the podcast is not only like a shout out, but also just a genuine thing that helped me and provided me value along my process and journey, and therefore ideally they can hopefully learn about it and then project the same energy and words onto their own audiences ultimately as well, because if it's valuable to that, because ideally if it speaks to my audience and me, and therefore the brand that I represent, it's ideally something that will also speak to the related audiences and the things that I caught inspiration from as well. And that's why collaboration as a whole is such the inspiring backdrop of this whole organization. After all, it's for global unification, collaboration, interwoven, attempts at different processes and products just through the happenstance and interest in trying, and also the interest in art and facilitating art, and also trying to exemplify how entrepreneurship is like art, or is symbolic for art overall, and it's an artistic process after all, and it also comes back to trying. A lot of anyways, I'll get back to that in the second episode that I was trying to make that I did in video earlier. Still, just for context about the brand, the first, so just to identify how personally DINKY TehC is attempting to leverage the template of storytelling in the way of entrepreneurship, is that our first product essentially was a child's book, a storyboard child's book, which is in essence how this template was able to translate into the future of our brand, by just sort of trying to make the basic nature of of entrepreneurship broken down into the three parts which make it into a storytelling process. Meaning that in the beginning it is in the beginning it's the market, so you're just identifying the issue, the problem, right? Like in the beginning of the story of any movie, yada yada, that sets the tone, it sets the process, it sets the whole not the process, the backdrop, the atmosphere, the environment. And so that's what the market is addressing essentially, and therefore the next thing is sort of the hero's journey. That's like where the journey of the person, the main character, is trying to get the problem, the ball into the basket, if you will. And in essence, that's why the third part of that's like the experience, is watching that happen and like understanding how that goes down. And then at the same time, if you experience a product, if you have seen one on the internet, I'm sure you've seen plenty of advertisements that it's very similar to the experience that company is trying to give to you, the person who's experiencing that advertisement. And therefore, the last thing, which is the hero of the hero's journey of any given process, is the product itself. So therefore, you want to end with the product with this little template, so that you want to exemplify the cool parts of the product to solve the problem, which starts in the beginning, which is the market, which is the cause, which is the issue which needs to be addressed, and that there's market demand, because the market equals the demand, which equals the cause, which equals the issues that need to be addressed, because there is a significant amount of energy in the world and life that wants that issue to have some attention around it, so that it can have a product to absolve and help absolve the issue that market is connected to. After all, so there's products, and so in episode 2, what I ended up doing is talking about the nature of optioning a company, and sort of just identifying how, like, if you are able to connect a company to the optioning process, which is like which in essence is like similar to so I talked about business as being like similar to games earlier, so we'll give a shout out to Games for Change. Big influence of mine is Games for Change. The second influence is M&A Science of this podcast, at least. M&A Science, I heard recently, speaking about collaboration and partnerships, which are very simplified versions of mergers and acquisitions, are similar to mergers and acquisitions, meaning buying a company is very similar to a partnership or a collaboration. And that is one of the biggest highlights and points of interest of our company, is to be able to identify that people are able to just mildly collaborate with people, and it can result in a merger and or acquisition. And episode 1 was to try to identify what an option is. Like, you can like an option you know, it's just a hypothetical like private equity acquisition of a company through an option is what our child books are kind of representative of, which is kind of, you know, a joke, but kind of also not a joke. But then again, jokes can also become real things in this world as well, and that's a big part of actually the mentality overall, like at Dinky Tech, because like Dogecoin, for example, was a joke to begin with, but now it's a significant piece of property in the world. And after all, this podcast is trying to combine 4 things, right? So we're trying to take spirituality, which is one of the biggest ones, music, business, and then also comedy. So like that's one of the biggest reasons comedy is actually significant, and I'm now glad that I'm having to redo this episode of the podcast, because that is kind of a significant thing to me, more or less, and it was reiterated by Elon Musk today as he's talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum under the same roof, or I forgot what the stream was about. But the bottom line is things can start as jokes all the time, and it's a brilliant way to start a business, in my opinion, entirely, because 100% of the time people get too self-conscious about products and trying things overall, and that comes to a later point. That's the third, you know, point, I guess, in this is and so the you know, bottom line is that that's how comedy is an effective tool. Another one is another shout out is to spirituality and how that relates to business, and how and almost like it's called spiritual science. There's a organization known as Self-Realization Fellowship. And a shout out there, because that was one of the pinnacles and backbones for me a long time ago for developing sort of a, I guess, thought process that relates to trying to acknowledge, I guess, energy overall, and then like business as an energy, as opposed to significantly thinking about money and focusing on money as the whole part of the process, because there's just many parts to the car, and ultimately a business is like a car. And that is how we ended up making our first child's book, which is called Dinky Tech and the Nature of Love, episode 1, and it is and it's the Spreadboard Hovercraft Skateboard is the title of it. It's on Amazon now. It's published recently, but this brings me to the point, or to the part of why that was the first book that we wanted to do for the storyboard child books. So overall, entrepreneurship, I mean, these child books are trying to address 3 things that there is market demand for, to start with the market, in talking about our own initial product in the marketplace, which is storyboard child books. Not only is there demand for, you know, entrepreneur mindset content for kids, for sure, these days, especially since that was missing big time when I was a young person, much less the talk about money significantly, like throughout the course of life, is missing from the education system overall, including all the way when I got through college. It was not present. So the bottom line is that with this first child book, it's called the Spreadboard Hovercraft Skateboard, because it's a symbol of a couple of different things. One is an actual invention, which is pretty legitimate and interesting, of the Hovercraft Skateboard, which is which I made a vlog about recently, it was about a month ago or so, and that's what actually inspired the invention of that specific invention in this specific storyboard child book, which is the Dinky Tech sort of quick and dirty product, like initial product that we're putting on the board, and as a company, like, just, you know, making a name for it. It's kind of like, it's not like sloppy, but it's not the best, most crisp product of all. This book that's on Amazon, you can go and I mean, it's because it's on KDP, it costs a couple dollars, but nonetheless, if anybody ever gets in contact with me, I'm happy to send it free to them, or maybe I'll put it up online for free somewhere, just because it's like kind of a landmark. It's almost like a weird little, I don't know if it's an NFT itself, but because it has 8 pages, and an NFT has to be what, 1 page or something. Anyways, bottom line, excuse me, point being is that the Hovercraft skateboard Spreadboard is a symbol for DINKY TehC itself. DINKY TehC is a mindset. Dinky was a dog a long time ago. He is no longer, doesn't exist anymore. As I said, he was a lab, and the tech version is making him the technical version, which makes him the scalable version, which is also about making him into the play version of making his mentality is the point, taking his, like, you know, his mechanisms that made him always want to play. He would always want to chase a ball. He would always have a ball to chase, and that's almost symbolic of, like, in entrepreneurship, again, you have to have that end point, and that you're trying to get to, the hero's journey, which is the end point. That's the light at the end of the tunnel, essentially. So therefore, he would always be chasing a ball, essentially, like every single day of his life, every second of his life, after all. So, like, his mentality is trying to be condensed into this company, mind frame, mentality, culture, everything above. So therefore, you know, the Spreadboard Hovercraft skateboard is not only symbolic of the first child book, but it's also symbolic of the mentality which DINKY TehC is trying to cause and distribute as a product in of itself, just for having any attachment or connection to the company culture or community by any means at all, like even including just being on the news, the email newsletter. It's all any little bit of contact or communication or insignia that DINKY TehC is a part of is supposed to represent that mindset and that mentality of the entrepreneurship mindset and mentality to want to travel and play and get around and move around and do things to not only cause new thoughts, but to cause change, which also causes inspiration and incentives and a constant learn to just look at new things and see different stuff and learn from it and gather information and insight from constantly trying to, change the dynamics and the places and the things that are in your purview and mentality and things overall by just experimentation and literally trying. And that's what, the mindset of DINKY TehC is about, and also the symbol for the Hovercraft skateboard Spreadboard. So in addition to that, there is that was the first that was the first child book storyboard Spreadboard, and the reason that is, there's a couple layers to it. There's like that symbolic that symbolic product is meant to, like I said, like for me personally, like traveling and being in motion and moving around. I've had different devices, bicycles, like kneeboard, scooter boards, skateboards and things over time, but ultimately they always cause and assist in the nature of entrepreneurship and also lifestyle, sacrificing creature and cutting out like certain aspects of life that are considered luxuries and things like that, which also makes room for more travel, and by not having some of those things which are like, whether it's physically or mentally that are that they're storage, they're luggage, they're in the background, they're items, they're physical things that maybe you own or whatever, materialistic. That for me was a lot of materialistic things that just I stopped interacting with and just kind of focused on having one item and tool to be able to get around with, or like, interact with, to be able to change my location and change my place of where I am physically. And that has been a big part of my journey, and it's also symbolic of the entrepreneur journey as a whole overall, and it's also symbolic of films after all. So like the three things that we're trying to address in making these storyboards and making these storyboard child books are, to begin with, so actually I'll just say invention is one. The second is the venture capital industry, because you can take one of these child's books and technically it's not just an idea. You can have, with these three panels that tell this little quick story of the market, the experience, and the product as the hero, you can take that to a VC and technically maybe get funded. It's genuinely something that conceptually could be bankable in a basic sense, and that's the whole point, is to have a basic something to at least remind you as you skip down the path of life that you wanted to quantify this conceptual value and idea that has market value into a template that can be taken into different places in the world. Number three is that it's a storyboard child book, because the storyboard is embodied by the film industry, which in essence is it's depicting the story, and that's what that's what the film industry has used, and that's what I studied to begin with, is film to begin with. So the main function that is behind me, and I guess like a marketing process and mentality, is storytelling. And after all, that's the dumbest down. most simplified version of storytelling is having sort of a beginning and a middle and an end. And for me, I guess for a while to just identify what those things were in a symbolic fashion, especially like, you know, converting the film industry mindset to the business overall mindset and trying to combine the venture capital with the film industry mindset took kind of a while to just identify how how certain things cross over and overlap and what the commonalities are and things like that. So like the most intuitive order of operations is like you start with the product. If you're, you know, I mean, excuse me, in the view of a consumer, you start viewing the product by, if you're just like online or on the internet, you view a product, and then like, or something is advertised, and then the second thing is how that product is positioned, how many people are seeing that product, like the fluff around that product, like the you know, if it's a video, that video has a beginning and a middle and an end. So that essentially is part of an experience, and anything that you see that relates to that product is part of the experience, and that was intentionally put in a certain order or place by the company so that the person who's experiencing it experiences it a certain way, and that is part of obviously the experience. And that's what any film is, and that's what any product is also. So when you look at the film industry, you look at the film as a product, and you also look at it as an experience. So like, you know, in essence, like the experience is like the electricity, and like the product is like one of the poles of electricity, and the market's the other poles of electricity. But you definitely need all three of them for every single product to function and flow in the universe or what have you, or the world, as a consistent entity and process that you know, provides value as a business on a recurring basis, and that energy is flowing like current on a continuous basis through those two conductors, essentially at all given times, and it recycles itself around that cycle or circuit. And you know, so moving on, we've got that's the interest of the child's books, and then the reason why there's excuse me. So I gave a shout out, or maybe I didn't give a shout out, to Self-Realization Fellowship, which is for having, you know, a big interaction on my spirituality and influence on spirituality over the course of my life. I think I did give them a shout out, so I guess I'll do that again, and because it's worth reiterating. And what they have done, from my point of view, I literally learned about it 12 years ago or something. And from a mentality standpoint, which is like the mentality, as I was saying, is just about everything. And like this specific organization like helped to just, was founded by Paramahansa Yogananda, and it just sort of makes science makes religion sort of scientific, in the sense that meditation is very key and internal thought is very key. And this is all how entrepreneurship as well is. Any given company has to just be acknowledging the market as the backdrop of the thing, as to where this, you know, company lives. Essentially, it lives in an environment, in a market. Another, you know, term for the market is a pool of gold that you want to stick a fishing, you know, put a fishing pole in, as the product, more or less. And like the, you know, the line, I guess, of the thing is the line of the fish line of the fishing pole is the experience. Anyways, bottom line though is this mentality of spirituality really just opens up and takes the ideas of numbers, and it takes the idea of data overall, and the industry of finance, and makes it into more of a visual game conceptually, because like that's the interest, is to sort of fine tune the internal work mentality and the, you know, a person's mindset, in other words, like. And it also empowers any given person, really, because of not only visualization, but sort of feeling and interacting with different data, which also has to do with empathy, which is, you know, seeing through other people's eyes, essentially. So it's, you know, it's character building in that sense. Entrepreneurship is as a whole. It's character building for that reason, because you're just considering and caring about more people on a consistent basis, because a market is just essentially a symbol. It's people, and that's. And it's different people when looking at different markets and things. Literally just, you know, if you draw a circle around it, it's just like filled with different folks that have certain interests and things. So like the bottom line is when you really focus on spirituality and really focus on those numbers and really focus on those pools and people and just the idea of the experience and the product themselves and how it's all electricity because they're all interacting, and how the, you know, specific product needs to fit within that pool and not necessarily be specifically like the other products in that pool at all necessarily. It just has to really focus on how to serve that demand that is that the, you know, that the pool represents, that pool of demand represents. Anyways, so spirituality is really significant, I would say, and just for me, big shout out to Self-Realization Fellowship, because that is meditation is just a key component, I think, in terms of entrepreneurship. That is a big part of the actual game of entrepreneurship. Like, if there was, like, I was trying to compare chasing the ball, like thinking, and like reading is like the game of entrepreneurship. That's like the game of, like, you know, some of trying to reach the end goal of, like, if like the light, you know, that at the end of a long journey is a ball, like, that an animal could be chasing and such, then like reading and meditation and feeling of these different energies and things that change on a consistent basis that relate to the market data, in other words, really meditating with market data and feeling the market data and actually making visual examples and analysis and constantly flowing with that market data through shifting the pieces of the market data through just like circles, visualizations, new opinions, like, you know, reading news of other people in the market and then just taking different viewpoints of the market and making different pictures, which is actually like kind of an illustration from acknowledging just different parts of different markets, and also getting weird data and information from weird places also that kind of overlap with similar markets, because a lot of things are similar and overlap in the world, is a big part of the game. I mean, it's not only really reading, but it's like meditation largely, and like those two things kind of have to crosshatch and overlap in many ways in terms of formatting and formulating different data sets and vibes, really, like vibing with the data and things, like, and like that's just the precursor, you know, like that sounds deep and almost like it's irrelevant to entrepreneurship, but it's really just to develop, it's like the training for the training, if you will, like, so it's like so that ideas and concepts for entrepreneurship can come organically. Like, if you practice meditation, in my opinion, and you practice data reading, and then just really look at all of business as a whole as one giant pool of water, like the ocean essentially, and like everything is connected, then essentially like you learn about one piece and you're learning about the whole ocean. Like, the whole ocean is essentially connected, like the universe, like people are all essentially interwoven, so they have commonalities and things that overlap and yada yada. So like, if you learn about one part of the ocean, you can always leverage that at a later time, and that's why learning, aka and meditating, are significant. Just that's like actually the game, in my opinion. Like, that's like the instructions for the game, essentially, of entrepreneurship, in my opinion. And like, you know, that's just the base, though. That's like the base rules. That's like, you need a soccer ball to play soccer. That's basically like what I'm saying. And then the game of soccer obviously always changes, the dynamics, the people, the interactions, the situations, those can all, you know, be symbols for products, and those will always change, so that keeps it interesting. And like, you know, it's just good, I think, for the mentality. And I think the way the world was designed is that we all are always needing to have change and live in the mad nature of the instance of change for just, you know, not only growth, but just like keeping things sharp. Like, it's just keeping, in other words, keeping things moving, keeping the mentality moving, keeping humanity moving, keeping stimulation, innovation, inspiration, motivation, I guess, for all stuff, realistically. And like, it's really about movement. It's all about movement. And, you know, whether it's physical or mental, it's just consistent movement is something that actually can come from reading and meditating significantly. Like, well, like, in other words, physical movement is fantastic, and then like that helps with the mental movement while you're physically moving also. So it's not just like you want to sit in a room that's quiet. For me, that's not ideal at all. I hate that. It's the complete opposite. Although it sounds like learning and, you know, meditating is something you need to do in a quiet room, it's 100% the opposite for me. And that's the whole point of the symbol of the Spreadboard as our first child book, storyboard, kids book, for you know, entrepreneurship, and sort of representing this whole mentality and vibe and such is you know, again, using the dog as the symbol, because the dog is outside playing realistically, you know, like, and there's never a time that they're not in some sort of playing field, which typically has to be outside, and typically it's always that way. I mean, if you're going to play a game at the park, you got to be outside. Like, it's not like it's gonna come when you're inside. And like, for me, like, the way I, you know, conceptualize things is like, when you're inside, it kind of cuts off a lot of external energy that comes from nature and things that is organic outside. And it's almost like when you're sitting in a car and then you step out of the car, you can feel it like that quickly. It's like, it's almost like a switch turns on and off. When you get in the car, all the energy's gone. Like, the vibrations and the energy of life in the universe, not the universe, but a lot of things that are natural subside. And it's just kind of like that, quick and interesting and peculiar, so to speak. But like, when you're in the game of life, the matrix, so to speak, like when you're outside, you're outdoors, there's vibrations, vibesies, and the bottom line is you're just sort of, you know, you're sort of flowing with that. And literally, information from businesses and things that you read when you're inside, or, you know, in a quiet place, or whether or not you're listening to a podcast on the go and you're learning things on the go, and then you turn it off and then you're still on the go, and then you're thinking about the things, and the things all marinate, and then you turn a corner and you see a picture on a wall, and then the things all come together. That's what I'm talking about. It's like all of the things combined. It's like outdoors, essentially, movement and reading and you know, marinating thoughts, and also meditating, and significantly writing as well. Writing is like, you know, also symbolized by there's child books. Like, significantly, not only in collaboration and different art forms is DINKY TehC aspiring towards, but also, you know, having like VC film agents, like / co-author, co-publishers, co-brokers, if you will, like, is something that we're, you know, also having on the board of things with DINKY TehC as a company to be starting to move into, which is people that represent the company, not only like internally but externally, essentially. So we have like a internal, you know, forward movement game plan, and then also like an external forward movement game plan, which which is more like entailing like a software, like a platform that's kind of a social media vibe. In the future, like, we want to start with the internal folks first. That's the intention at the present time, and then like from this ability to continue to spread energy outward, it's ideally taking this template mindset and you know, and distribution of more content and vibes, and ideally a community that's like that's fully, you know, sort of in parallel or in sync with the company culture and cause, which entails literally, like, I guess, playing games outdoors to make change, and then also making companies out of that, but also starting that with child's books, and like, you know, so they're kind of co-publishers. But we also at DINKY TehC are trying to really offer a host of services. But realistically, it's funny and ironic, because just me making this podcast is going to make ideally start to make, because this is like one of the first legitimate forms of distribution we're going for, like, to get into a larger form of and pipeline of consistent larger scale distribution. This is one of the first. I'm just kind of starting to step and stride into the media little by little, and it's been actually a couple years, but never really with the intent to start to try to go into farther, I mean, more, you know, impactful media sources that have higher rates of distribution and, you know, reach overall. And so that's why I even start with the child book, in other words, is one of those also, but it's also not the organic distribution of attention that's a marketing sort of term, is not that easily trackable, like, just through common sense, believe it or not. Like, there's like I've watched a lot of marketing content over time, and realistically, through trying different things, it's an interesting game of which one actually causes the most amount of views, the most amount of interaction or engagement, and viewership or listenership. In this instance, for this podcast, it completely varies depending on the platform, and then the process that you sort of approach that platform with, because like Instagram, for example, has its own strategy and things like that. Obviously, people have an acknowledgement of this, but the bottom line is that for me in trying to leverage varied outlets or varying outlets for media distribution, and kind of doing it mainly myself in the meantime, it's like an interesting and peculiar running around, like it's in other words, it's like running around a track trying to touch different forms of distribution and seeing which one will actually penetrate a little bit further into the pipeline of media and things, so that ultimately it's possible to get more crispy on the types of content and things that are being put into the media, because there's a little bit more revenue flow and a little more interaction and engagement and things with the DINKY TehC brand overall, so that I could take and recycle and finally start to put a little more enhancement into the DINKY TehC brand, which has been held up by popsicle sticks in the meantime for a long time, because the organic interaction and energy interaction with the overall actually society, and actually the the nature of people, if you will, like the exposure and interaction with humanity has been at a low. And so that is something over time and effort and energy of focus and things like that is consciously now being tried. There's an attempt to turn that now, to change that dial, to flip it over so that it goes from internal to more, so that there's more exposure, if you will. So there's more visibility of the brand in the short and long term of the brand for a few different forms of engagement. Ultimately, we are a kind of, that's what I was saying was fun a minute ago and interesting, is it depends what sort of culture and community, people who are out there, in other words, coming back to me and then starting with certain types of proposal. I am trying to start at the core of the values of what I think DINKY TehC stands for, and then therefore reverberating this, starting to now with the public and with the media, so that the people that come back to me are going to be a big part of the growth process of this whole organization, because those are the first people I give attention to, realistically. And that's because it's the highest, it's the highest gravitational pull to me. I believe that if people start to come out of the woodwork somehow and are positively influenced and want to engage and interact and do business, meaning collaborate in music or film or a business idea where there is revenue behind it, and we have a host of sort of services to be able to facilitate certain demand. Obviously, it kind of ranges, honestly, off the top, ideally, one of the first services that DINKY TehC's trying to offer as a sort of business growth consulting brand is mergers and acquisition services, meaning if anybody wants to sell their business, that we would help facilitate that as a broker, essentially. But it's not genuinely and significantly a priority, because as a music sort of person, if you will, because business music is kind of the nature of the description, of the brand itself. Even this podcast, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but I'm just kind of rolling and flowing and hoping that after all, by the time that it's over, that it's kind of it's a representation of business music. This is kind of an extension of the child book. I guess technically the child book was the first product for DINKY TehC. Second was, I guess, music. I have one song distributed at the present day time. It's again all held up by popsicle sticks. It's just been done really quickly and thrown down. And then I also have some clothing that's for sale, but that's all just starting, because that's actually one of the first items that DINKY TehC ever made was clothing. It was a t-shirt. I had a t-shirt making machine when I was fresh out of college, and it would make direct-to-garment shirts and prints, which was unique because you had to do silk screening other than that machine that I got, and it was difficult to try to manage the whole business myself. Plus, it didn't encompass all of the things that the brand, if you will, was intending to try to encompass, and ultimately manufacturing, distributing, doing marketing at the time, especially when the internet wasn't as mature back then, was not as ideal to continue to single-handedly do just myself and facilitate the designs and things, especially when software was less easily accessible, and have all of the working parts be under my own self. there was just too little that I knew, and just a long time has had to pass in terms of building not only a brand, but just facilitating different elements of the entrepreneurship wheel that ultimately I find, entertaining in addition, because it's like a different form of, it's a different form of engagement with entrepreneurship, and the whole wheel is interesting after all. But ultimately, there are parts that I wanted to emphasize and try to focus on in terms of, ultimately, for sure, music, film development is still one, and like marketing is a key feature for that for me. But after all, like, this podcast and this Storyboard Child Books is like the foundation. This is the foundation of the brand. Like, so even though it sounds like if you're listening to this and me talk, it sounds like, oh, he's unclear about his products, this and that. Whereas it's not exactly that. It's that this is a collaboration brand. And as we speak, this is journalism. Meaning, where if you're listening to this, it's journalism, because what I'm doing is making a product right now, and this product is meant to not only be a product, which I guess can, earn revenue, but it's also like a promotion product. And therefore, if you catch wind of this, and you catch wind of my energy, and you like it, and it's vibey, and you happen to create, anything really, or you have a business or have any services, that's what this is meant to, that you need or want in a business. If you want services in a business, if you want to hire someone, if you want a loan, if you want to grow your business, DINKY TehC is essentially a consulting company and can facilitate this demand at the current time. If more and more demand comes in certain ways, then I might change the structure. But right now, we're just a consulting company, and we're open-formed and open-ended because I have a lot of resources and people and good stuff and services that I can direct people to facilitate business growth for a host of different businesses. Like the key, I'll try not to bore anyone at this point, but I mean, appreciation if you're still sticking with me for what it's worth. The 5 key pinnacles I would say that DINKY TehC stands for, and at least it says this on my LinkedIn and website, current Linktree website, is that mergers and acquisitions, in other words, helping sell a business, is 1. Marketing services is 2, including human resources, that's 3. Loans is number 4. And number 5 is product development. So like research and development will consult and help actually manufacture or develop a product. Those are just, again, core services that right now there's open vessels to, but as time and things move along, those vessels will change, and that's part of the fun of entrepreneurship overall, like I was talking about before. This whole thing is ever dynamic and ever changing. I'm also, there's also crypto on the table, but that's just an added feature to me. That's a tool, and that can only help strengthen the overall ability and momentum and emphasis of any given movement of the brand going forward in the future. So bottom line is, bottom line ultimately is to consult the most current website as this continued podcast and or media outreach content continues, because whatever's current there is going to be the most prominent source, which is speaking to the most prominent source of services that I'm offering, the most prominent sources of demand that's coming through, the most prominent sources of demand that I want to service in the marketplace. It's super ironic how ever presently changing that kind of is, although at the same time it's actually not, because because for me, like, I started as like a film person, so it's very much that I am incentivized by people who want to collaborate in music, because that kind of starts, because that can be done quickly. In other words, that can be done quickly. Same with a podcast. Realistically, it can be done quickly. So those types of collaborations I'm super open to on the short and long term. I mean, beyond that though, like, it's like we're like a growth agency and sales brokerage. Like, it's pretty basic when it's like laid out in that fashion. I feel like those services won't diminish ever, and that's why I'm even speaking about them, because that's a big part of the emphasis that I would hope to sort of highlight a little bit, is like those services. I'm really trying to emphasize that they stick around. Obviously, attention in this growth process. Right now, it's a growth process. I've got a lot of different wheels on the board, and momentum is going to play a factor in how I direct the company for sure. But like I said, that those are the core features of the brand, and adding agents. So those core features of the core consulting brand is the nature of Dinky Tech for right this second. In the future, having agents like VC film agents, which basically just means agents, people who also either publish child's books and follow in my footsteps, or, and this will bring me to the next point right now. This is what the first podcast was about. So that's basically a excessively long introduction to Dinky Tech, the brand. So those 5 core services are like what we stand for in terms of consulting for any given business. And again, the world is gigantic. So again, if there's more demand in one thing or another, in other words, if I start meeting people to service for demand for one thing or another, then it's going to create our niche, Dinky Tech, in the marketplace. And then I have to focus more on those things as time goes on. Right now, it's such a frail popsicle stick brand, which is ironic and fun and funny, that I'm just putting my energy out there to vibe with whoever's out there vibing with me. Again, I will always collaborate on music. I will always collaborate on films, pretty much. And that's not necessarily just for fun, but it's kind of is for fun. Those are almost like hobbies. I would almost do that for fun in my free time, for free, but it's not, gonna be targeted that way, obviously. And then maybe doing like speeches or speaking sometime in the future is conceptually possible. Like, it's more ideal to speak something and then have it turn into a child's book like this fashion, rather than to actually write it down or to have someone else with me. Literally, that's the biggest part of the whole thing with me, and why I'm even probably still talking at this juncture, because there's a lot of time, effort, and energy of sort of me spending a long time really trying to manifest this type of vibe, so that in the future, when it was the past, that it was possible to be able to spend the most time on collaborations. Like, it's a collaboration brand, and that's really what I'm maybe trying to not have be mistaken. It's not exactly the most linear thing where it's like we have popsicles today and hamburgers tomorrow. It's a little more in flux than that. It's like we have crypto today and crypto with a side of rice we have crypto and I don't know, marketing or M&A tomorrow. And again, that's kind of a joke, but also like those things are not too many things, right? Like, it's literally, there's not too many things. And like when it's talking about business growth, like there's not a whole lot of things. There's not a whole bunch of things. Mergers and acquisitions, selling a business, helping sell a business, referring the sale of a business is not, is one of the most core things I want to do, or represent. So if there's demand across the world, if you're hearing this and you want to sell a business, get at me. My email is duck0027@icloud.com. If you want to sell a business, you're anywhere in the world, I have one of the biggest mergers and acquisitions buying communities behind me. So I can likely get the business sold and at a good price and by a good person with integrity. So that's number one, okay? That's why I'll try to at least like clear some of the fog. But again, the fog is actually fun, it's supposed to be fun because it causes collaboration in unknown ways. It's just like basically we're a consulting firm, right? Or a consulting company. And that means that we'll entertain and consult for a host of different things, and it will depend literally on the individual. It will come down to the individual. So this outreach, it seems like, and every individual has a separate problem anyways. So like, it's not just a steady stream. Dinky Tech this is the whole point, is like, I think that the preference of mine is having inconsistency. So therefore, having an inconsistent menu of options also as a brand is part of my wheelhouse also. It's part of the DNA of the brand. It's literally based on an interaction, it's the pace. It has to do, it's symbolic of the pace and the rate of change in the world at the present day anyways. That's why this brand Dinky Tech is appropriate for the time and the place that it exists in now, because there's such ever-present change in the world right now that literally, if you talk to me on any given day, what you're getting consulting for is what's current, and it's not what's yesterday. And therefore, any given meetings that we have or engage with will be followed up with by the best research and development and the best processes, the best advertising resources, the best marketing resources, or the best person to buy your company that's possible as a consulting brokerage that Dinky Tech essentially is. But on the top end, that's why I talked about music and film. On the top end, as a person who does like music, I don't mean does like music, I mean makes music. I make music and essentially am working to use that to collaborate with people to spread the message of Dinky Tech, not only in the business sense, but musically to help engage a wider spread audience. So this podcast will just entail podcasting, maybe with some bits of music spliced in here and there. Maybe not. Maybe we'll keep those realms separate, but I do have the distribution outlet for the music is a little bit separate. Nonetheless, to move on to the next part of the last podcast, to move on to the part that from a previous recording, there were two more of them. One entails, from a previous recording, it entails similar to like I was talking about before with the Spreadboard, the Hovercraft skateboard Spreadboard. That's our first child book. So essentially, taking that mentality, right? That's also representative of a mentality. But basically, like if we made that Spreadboard, right? If we sold enough of those child books, we're new in the marketplace, so we're trying to sell enough of those child books. But if possible to sell enough of those child books, right? Then I would take the money and actually try to develop that product. So then the Hovercraft skateboard, the Spreadboard, would actually exist. And then the idea is to sell to the market that relates to that product, which is, the way I see it, a lot of demand, because ultimately people are interested in entrepreneurship and traveling to facilitate, not only an entrepreneurship mindset, but recreationally also, just to get around, to have fun and do, and the same reason somebody rides a bicycle, the same reason somebody rides a skateboard, or things in between that are similar to that. It's recreational, but it's very instrumental to entrepreneurship. But the bottom line is, if we hired a company, and not hired a company, but partnered with a company, and they manufactured a whole lot of Spreadboard Hovercraft skateboards, and then all of a sudden we owned their time and energy is only 100%. That's a finite resource. So like, if after they were at a $10 million revenue, and then we took them to a $42 million revenue because we had them research and develop and feed the marketplace and the core center of demand for this Hovercraft Spreadboard skateboard in the marketplace, it's like we are optioning their company. So it's like we're like, because we are developing products, essentially it's like a way to option purchasing a company. Although it's not exactly like going through a merger and an acquisition, it's like purchasing a company, because like the podcast M&A Science says, or has said in their recent episode 155, is that that a collaboration and a partnership is not far from a merger and acquisition. So the bottom line there, and why that hopefully sheds light on a positive way of looking at everything, is that like collaboration, it's like going from 0 to 100 real quick. Like collaboration and partnership is something simple. Like it's almost like you can hire someone to be a partner, really, and that's like not even, that's like 0 miles an hour. That's almost like negative miles an hour. If you're giving somebody money to manufacture something, it's like you don't even have to talk to them, they'll just do it. So that's like a partnership, though, realistically. Like it's just that simple and basic. But 100, that's 0 miles an hour, and 100 miles an hour is buying the company. And that's just energetically is a symbol, right, of if collaboration and partnership is merged and aligned and not far from mergers and acquisitions, meaning buying that company. The idea of mentioning this and what also comes back to the first Spreadboard storyboard child's book, is that you know, if this hypothetically this child book caused this product to be developed, and obviously this is hypothetical, but obviously if we, you know, it went from a $10 million, the manufacturer, the company that made the Spreadboard skateboard, if they went from a $10 million revenue to a $30 million revenue company, or $42 million revenue, I said, based on our leveraging them as a manufacturer and then having them produce consistently for us, it's not as though we own the company, but it's like an option to own the company in essence. And then, like, obviously if you brought them that much revenue, they would probably offer like shares, stock shares and things. So it's like a way to buy a company. And it's just like, basically I'm just trying to illustrate and just energetically make the flow and the transition from, like, you know, just a simple partnership where you're actually just paying somebody to do something, and it's super basic, but if you're selling it at a higher price that you're buying it at, then on an ongoing consistent basis from an energetic standpoint, it's then possibly conceivably viable to step up to buying the company ultimately. Like, it's not even like you have to do that. If you guys are making money together, the dynamic's good, then okay, so you have that option. It's like a range. It just kind of softens the idea of, like, the idea that you can buy a company, or that you have to buy a company to increase or have a high amount of revenue. It's like you can start with creation also. Like a child's book, storyboard child's book, is like something that you just take the market, you take the experience, and you take the product itself, you write it down, you make it into, I mean, not only a child's book, like that's, you know, also obviously good. If we can sell child's books, that's more power to us. That's what I'm hoping to do. But ultimately as well, it's about energetically putting that out there and then taking the steps through action, because action is what manifests the process. And, you know, taking certain amounts of money or talking to people and just collaborating and just putting the energy out there. Energy, or money is energy also, so it's energetically matching with this, you know, this concept of actually buying the company. And that's the point of kind of like, it's like you start manufacturing something, you start a business, and it's like whoever your partners are, it's kind of like you're merging with them. And in terms of acquiring them, like that's just it's just a couple inches away in terms of the way that the mergers and acquisitions science company and podcast thinks about things. From episode 155, I believe that was, could have been 154, but that's their podcast. Anyways, that's the third shout out, and the last shout out I'll do, which is this sorry for this podcast being a little, I would say it's a little bit drier than the last one that I did. I just did a longer run, doing a whole recording where I took my earphone out and it actually stopped recording like just a couple seconds after I started the recording. And in addition to that, I'll end the podcast with the third and last point, which is just that the universe relates to all people, and that all people are all of the universe, which just means that everybody is everything. And the bottom line there is that everyone can do everything, and that relates to entrepreneurship, and that relates to empowering everybody, that relates to, you know, everybody being similar to every single cell that's on this planet, that results to every that relates to every cell that's in the universe having a symbiosis and relying on each other to exist, similar to electricity. If there's one part of the electrical circuit that's missing, the electric current doesn't flow, therefore the electricity doesn't exist. And what I mean by that, all kind of coming together in one specific sense, or one specific point, is that you know, anyone can be everything. It also means everyone can be an entrepreneur. Everyone can acknowledge these markets, and also, you know, report back to this child book template and just think in a different way. A lot of people think ideas are valueless ultimately, but like with this template and just unpacking an idea into 3 different parts, into the market, the experience, and the product itself, and just being a little bit specific, that it's ideal to be able to just acknowledge that so people can put supply into the demand, basically, like, and it's just empowering by just acknowledging that there is that ability to, you know, to be anything essentially, especially when you start with market demand, because anybody can fill it, and it's a matter of like who does it first that kind of gets the reward and the money. But really, you're just helping solve a problem, you're caring, you're being empathetic, you're growing as a person to do that, you're learning, you know, and building character along the way. So hopefully this is like full circle the way that I sort of figured this out was well, not figured it out, but what sort of started the podcast of from before when I did this same topic is like trying to help a little creature who got his leg stuck on, like, he got his leg stuck on something, and he was very small, and it seemed like something similar to being like a surgeon for for a mosquito. And obviously I'm not a surgeon for mosquitoes, but it's like you are that. When you're trying things, you are that. So it's about action, realistically. Hey, thanks again for tuning into the Dinky Tech and the Nature of Love podcast, episode 1. Thanks again. Cheers, peace. Oh yeah, and the Spreadboard Hovercraft skateboard is powered by an alternator that powers the battery, that powers the fan, and that powers the alternator. Thanks again, Dinky Tech. Peace.